Let's go ahead and check in on the first match like we talked about with the decks. A little bit more in depth. We start off with the Holy Wrath Paladin. Start things with the Christology buff with the Rise of the Mechs event. People anticipated to help put Paladin on the map, and Paladin already kind of was there. Mech Paladin made a splash or two within the Grandmaster regular season, but people largely settled on the combo Paladin as a way for you to actually have that win condition. But what gets really interesting, TJ, is the secondary and tertiary decks.
Yeah, that's right. The secondary deck kind of operates more so against... It's kind of the anti-aggressive deck in a way, because you cut things that are hard to use. I would even say maybe it's like an anti-mage deck specifically, because you cut some of the combo and add in more card draw and an additional board clear. But this deck is sort of anti-mage in general. You bring this list, this deck, when you expect pretty much a field full of mages. We saw it brought in, was it week 2 or 3, because of that reason alone, and also because Christology going to 1 mana gave it a little bit of a boost. But I don't think what Eddie was expecting was players to bring Warrior. He got it right for every other region, and pretty much everybody else in Americas, except for his first opponent, Purple, is the only player to bring Warrior this week. It is the toughest matchup. Now, I don't think Purple's deck is designed to beat Holy Wrath Paladin. It's not a warrior that had Paladin in mind. It runs Arcanist Elysiana. It doesn't have like the full bomb package in the primary deck with Augmented Elix. So even though this is a favorable matchup for Warrior on paper, Purple doesn't have all the tools necessary to dominate this matchup. And Dan, I've been playing this matchup a lot. I've been playing Holy Wrath Paladin a lot. I've been thinking about it a lot. We even play tested it on Thursday leading into the matchups.
Yeah, he even renamed his son Shirvallo.
Not his middle name now. But it's and even after all that, even putting so much prep work into it, I still do not know what the correct game plan is for the Warrior. I don't know what gives you the highest win percentage as Warrior. It's a long matchup that can get messy. There's 2 paths to victory as the Warrior. 1, get enough armor to outlive 2 Holy Wraths. That's 50 plus. And 2, get that critical mass of bombs at the end of the game to where your opponent can't play around it and can't heal up out of it. And I think the card that shows you essentially which game plan to go through is Eternium Rover. If you have Eternium Rover on 1, the armor game plan opens up because you essentially start the game with additional armor. And 2, if you don't have Eternium Rover, you have bomb cards earlier, then that signals a bomb plan. It's very interesting. And when practicing this matchup, I won with both ways and I lost with both ways. So, very cool matchup, Dan. Very cool matchup. Spiel ended.
Thank you for that great breakdown. I got a chance to sit down with Gallon and talk with him. He practiced with Purple for apparently 20 hours for this specific matchup.
That's what it takes. I practiced for 6 hours, and I had no idea at the end of it.
Well, I feel like at the end of the 20 hours, you do come to some conclusions, but also you don't get that many games in because there is a lot of things to debate back and forth, especially when you start factoring Undertaker stuff. Eddie choosing to pass so that he doesn't give unnecessary armor to Purple.
Yeah.
This makes a lot of sense, and why you kind of talked about the armor being a win condition for the Warrior.
Yeah. And honestly, while passing doesn't give armor over to Purple, in a sense, it does in a way, because that's one less 1/1 that Purple has to deal with. The way you win as Paladin in this matchup is essentially by throwing all of your damage at face. Your True Silver Champion swings need to go face. Your Hammer of Raz need to go face. Your Elven Archers need to go face. Any additional chip damage from your 1/1s needs to go face. It's just about maximizing the damage you deal and minimizing the armor that the Warrior can gain.
So the first game, I anticipate to be very much Bomb Warrior favored. I think that as you get closer to the end of the deck, you also become extremely vulnerable to bombs. There's not much way you can counterplay against it. I do anticipate Purple to start off with a 1-0 lead in the likely scenario. Obviously, there's ways for Eddie to win otherwise.
Yeah.
And then going to game number 2 and 3, it'll come down a lot to more of the Undertaker package and how the mechs are able to assemble a pretty good assault against Warrior, right? One thing that we've learned is that as much as Warrior likes to use mechs, Warriors are also kind of vulnerable to mechs.
Yep.
Very ironic. And that ends up becoming a infinite loop, it feels like, with the Undertaker and Immortal Prelate. And that will be the center focus as the series continues to develop. So keep an eye out for this first game. If Eddie can get an upset victory, it'll be massive and improve his chances significantly in order to get through the series, even more than average. Because obviously winning the first game bumps your chance to win the series by a lot, but I would say it goes a lot more, maybe an extra 20% bump.
Yeah. But on the other hand, as I talked about earlier, Purple is not as much of a favorite as you'd normally expect in this matchup. Because he doesn't have things like Augmented Elec in his primary deck. The amount of bombs that he can shuffle in later is not enough to just win him the game on its own. He has 2 Clockwork Goblins, 2 Wrench Calibers, that's it. Paladin has one of the best toolkits at neutralizing Blastmaster Boom because they can negate the damage while clearing it on the same turn with Timeout. So, just a few additional things to note. And see, this is, you'd think normally on that turn, oh, okay, True Silver Champion, the Eternium Rover, minimize the armor gain and just hit base with Acolyte of Pain, but...
Yeah, I think it's a simple trade-off. If he attacks into the 1/2, not only is he giving his opponent armor, he's also losing damage to the face.
Yep.
This way, if he attacks the True Silver Champion to the face, the most life that the Eternium Rover can gain is 4, which is offset by the fact that you swing your weapon again twice to the face.
And if he does want to gain, if Purple does want to gain 4 from the Eternium Rover, he's giving Eddie card draw, which means that, you know, if the damage is the same and one path gets you 1 card deeper in your deck, which means 1 card closer to your combo, that path is always going to be better because this deck is, at least Eddie's primary deck, is linear in its win condition. It needs to draw through its whole deck most of the time. And it needs to Shirvala for 0, Belful Banker, and Holy Wrath to face for 25. In most cases against Warrior, Holy Wrath for 25 twice means double Banker.
Yeah. Both players really taking their time roping out, and I do anticipate this to be a very common trend in this matchup, given that there are some very elaborate combos and setups that you need to do. You need to do constant inventory check. You need to see how many cards am I holding, how many cards are left in my deck, how many pieces of combo do I have, what do I really need to pull it off, or how much mana do I need to pull things off in the following turns. And that's going to be something that you regularly check on top of the usual, what's the board state, am I taking too much damage, what are the life totals, etc.
Yeah. And it gets complicated by the fact that as Purple approaches that 50 armor total, Eddie will also have to make decisions of, well, what does the board state look like? Can I answer it without sacrificing too much of my own damage to face, like True Silver Champion swings, like 1/1s trading into minions as opposed to attacking, things like that. So it can get complicated.
Move quickly.
And I think we talked about it a lot the week that we had a few Holy Wrath Paladins. Like, resource management is probably the hardest part about this deck.
Yes, hand space.
Yeah, looking at your hand and saying, what card can I dump to make room for all this card draw that I have? Like, what card is the best one to use on the board in a vacuum? Like, can I just dump Shrink Ray on an empty board? Is that something that I'd ever do? Those types of questions sometimes play in your mind. Giving up a key piece of removal just to make hand space for your ability to draw cards.
Yeah, I mean, Eddie, like, it feels like half of Eddie's hand draws cards. Not really, but the idea is that he has that option to, but he doesn't have the hand space to do that. Prismatic Lens draws 2 cards, Blood Mace Thaunos, and Flash of Light all keep his hand size count to 10. He needed to dump something else.
Yep.
There is, some concept of like whether or not we should hold on to Holy Wrath even, because there's 2 copies of Holy Wrath in the deck, and you generally only get to get 1 guaranteed against your opponent unless you're able to somehow shuffle 2 Shrivalas and save both Baleful Bankers. And that's something that's going to take up even more hand space if so.
Yeah. In this matchup, you often don't have the luxury. Unless you just get so far ahead on board that you bring your opponent down to like 15 health, which rarely happens. You usually need both. And that makes it awkward. And also the fact that with Prismatic Lens, it's expensive. You have to have the hand space for it. And also, if you haven't drawn Shrivala yet, you could be in a position where you essentially make a 25 cost card that's crucial to your game plan. Like, let's say he hasn't drawn Shrivala or Holy Wrath, and from Prismatic Lens, he hits exactly Shrivala and Holy Wrath. His Holy Wrath costs 25. Even though his Shrivala can be played earlier, it doesn't matter because he likely won't win the game because he won't have the damage with only 1 Holy Wrath. So it's like a risk versus reward kind of situation with the Prismatic.
Reporting for duty.
Purple sees 5 life on the board, sees the dynamic opportunity. Pretty fast play from Purple, and it could be something that's reflected in the fact that Eddie really likes to take his time. Eddie and PNC are probably the 2 slowest players that we generally get to see in Grandmasters. It's because of how meticulous they are about thinking about a lot of plays.
Looks like a Prismatic Lens play here. Eddie sees 2nd Holy Wrath, which means he can't get that massive punish from the Shrivala. That doesn't allow him to win the game. Since it draws a minion and a spell, he can't like get a 25 cost Baleful Banker, for instance. So his combo will still be online. He may get like a 25 cost Consecrate, but that's not as big of a deal. And he does need to think about, though, if he has at 10 cards right now. If he Elven Archers and Prismatic Lens and then doesn't pick up something that's playable, then he will be at 10 cards, and he doesn't have anything in his hand that he can dump. Flashlight would bring him right back to 10 cards, and Baleful Banker is necessary to complete the combo. So he realizes that he can't go for Prismatic Lens, and just throws out the Consecration to, again, just dump a card from his hand. It's all about that resource management, that hand management.
Purple has the opportunity to set up Dr. Boom Mad Genius in the coming turns as well. Something I do wonder if he actually wants versus guaranteeing the armor return.
Yeah.
Kind of what we were talking about. Control Warrior can play a Freeze Mage approach to this matchup. Eddie picks up the Prismatic Lens. Finally getting some card drawn action here. Like you mentioned, Consecration at 25, but the idea Shrivala is now cheap.
Not really too effective. You almost never want to hit Shrivala from Prismatic Lens just because it's, by the time you want to play it, unless it's against an aggro matchup where the combo's not how you win, it's going to cost 0 once you play it anyway because your spells are so expensive and you're playing so many of them.
Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah, and going back to your previous point, keeping the armor up is actually just, on average, more armor gain than Dr. Boom Mad Genius. After a few turns, once that 7 armor starts to get less value. Because if you think you get 7 armor 20% of the time, over the course of that time, you would have gained 10 armor from just the hero power from the normal warrior hero power. So oftentimes if your game plan is armor, if you realize that that's still an option for you, you'll hold on to Dr. Boom Mad Genius until kind of the very last moment. Or if you have no other options.
Right. The last burst of health is what's really important.
Unless you feel like you aren't going to be able to get that massive armor, that 50-plus armor, and you have to play Dr. Boom Mad Genius to try and find extra pressure and extra bombs, that's when you'll play it as well. But I still think it's okay for Purple to go for an armor game plan. He's still got 2 shield blocks left in his deck. The armor from Dr. Boom Mad Genius alone. Plus he has 1 more Eternium Rover and another Warpath in his deck, which, you know, even though it's kind of a weird play, you're playing an Eternium Rover triple Warpath. It's 6 armor gain, which can sometimes be the difference between dying to 2 Holy Wraths and not dying to 2 Holy Wraths.
Yeah, it makes sense. Purple trying to get as much board tempo as possible. His Town Crier was drawn after he had already picked up his Militia Commander Ziliak. That's why he was pretty upset a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Eddie picks up Christology. I believe there's only one minion in the deck remaining.
Yeah, it's just the Novice Engineer. He played the Acolyte of Pain, played the first Novice, Crystal Smith, Blood Mage, and Elven Archer.
Using the Shrink Ray just to get the cards out of the hand here, something that's really common. Eddie's at 7 cards remaining, so we're going to get to the conclusion of this game fairly soon.
Yeah.
Even though it's been kind of like a drawn-out game, every turn Eddie's going down to the very bottom of the rope.
But
he's almost decked out.
Those micro decisions matter because he needs to find the room to be able to draw those cards.
Yes, this is a hard deck.
Yeah, and it may seem like the important turns are like the last couple turns, like managing your fatigue and the bombs that are in your deck and managing how efficiently you deal damage. But the turns previously to it are the turns that set up for it, making sure that you have the resources that you need to deal those last bits of damage.
Bomb being drawn.